Alberta separation talks continue to heat up, although they might have just taken a blow recently, which we will get into because there's some interesting details about the counter operations that might actually be causing the separation themselves. And also, secretly in the background, Quebec has been slowly working towards their own separation agreement, but of course the media is scared of ticking off Quebec, so it's not getting anywhere near as much pushback or coverage. But speaking of Alberta, an American influencer trying to move to Canada was just denied. I guess she should have tried to be a foreign entrepreneur. As well, Canada signed a huge military deal worth $4 billion, and the US and Canada have a shared problem with the foreign entrepreneurs and the dangerous trucks that we are seeing on the road. We're going to go over the fraud details with the lovely foreign entrepreneurs around that industry, which again is a US-Canada problem. There's a lot to talk about in today's video, so let's get into it.
An Alberta justice finds a proposed referendum question on separation contravenes the Constitution. In a decision Friday, Justice Colin Feasby said it's because the proposal, as it stands, would violate the Charter and Indigenous treaty rights. But one political scientist says that may not be the end of the process.
Canada is just going to become a land of warring fiefdoms where everybody is just competing for their own interests. And this all comes down to the fact that our federal government has spent 10 years trying to convince us there is no such thing as Canada and there is no such thing as a Canadian. Because yes, we do have what's happening with the Alberta separation, with them trying to become their own sovereign nation. So is Quebec. And a lot of people don't know this, but there's actually a separatist movement in Newfoundland as well. It just gets almost no coverage, but it's a real thing.
The fact that it's been found unconstitutional doesn't necessarily mean that the question can't be put. What the government has done with Bill 14 is said that that a referendum question that asks the government to do something that is unconstitutional or outside of provincial jurisdiction.
Unconstitutional, allegedly, for the Indigenous and the First Nations, but those are also the same people who continue to try and make themselves their own sovereign nation. So what does it matter who your federal government is? If you're your own sovereign nation, is it Canada or if it's Alberta?
Is not binding.
Introduced Thursday, Bill 14 proposes several changes for citizen-led referendum questions. One of them considers applications to never have been made if they were submitted before the amendments come into effect and a petition was not issued. Justice Minister Mickey Amery said petitioners could reapply.
It appears that it will not only be easier to launch a referendum question, but there's no limit on how many times the same question can be brought up.
The justice did.
They did say it's going to be easier in some ways, but they're also going to make it way more difficult in others. They're banning a bunch of words that can be on the questions, on these petitions. One of which is independence. Another word is Republican. So the word Republican is even banned from being allowed to be submitted.
Did say a different referendum proposal could be constitutional. The Alberta Prosperity Project plans to resubmit its question.
We're thrilled with where we're at, and we're very happy and grateful to Danielle Smith and her government for taking the steps that they took.
Another petition brought forward by Thomas Lukazik, this one in favor of Confederation, was certified earlier this week. He says the changes are playing favorites.
Not only is it amending laws retroactively to suit Danielle Smith and the UCP party and the separatists, it is also overriding any decisions made by an independent body.
So my favorite part about that foreigner coming in and trying to influence Canadian politics is his question and his petition could trigger its own separation vote, which is the interesting thing. So just from a high level explanation so you guys can understand, there's two petitions being submitted. One petition wants to leave, one petition wants to stay. But essentially both petitions are bringing forward a yes or no question on if Alberta should leave or stay. So it could open them up to a world where they say, are you voting yes or no that Alberta should stay part of Canada and be part of Confederation? But if people vote no against that question, that they don't believe it should stay, then technically, even though that question was supposed to be for them staying, it could mean, well, we don't have the confidence in staying, so we need to leave. Could be the question that actually triggers the referendum and the separation. Of course, there's going to be a bunch of details. There's going to be a lot more hoops, but it's just interesting that could be one of the things. Now, speaking of all of these separation movements, these referendums, all these things that we're seeing, Ottawa has to begin to consider the possibility of a Quebec referendum The potential election of the Parti Québécois is causing concern among federal politicians. The Parti Québécois dominates in the polls for nearly 2 years, and its leader, Paul Saint-Pierre Plamond's promise to hold a referendum on Quebec's sovereignty during his first term have reverberated all the way to the federal capital. Officials in Prime Minister Mark Carney's government held discussions this fall to determine how Ottawa should respond to the PQ's rhetoric in Quebec City, according to Radio-Canada. A lot can change in a year, the sources noted. Although PQ has a 20-point lead in the polls, Plamond's election in the provincial vote scheduled for October 26 is not yet a foregone conclusion, which is very true. And obviously, we could see media manipulation heat up before then. We could see a massive shift in the polls. I mean, look what happened to Pierre during the last election. He had a massive lead. Things swapped last minute. And yes, of course, his loss had a lot to do with media manipulation, of course. But the thing is, in Canada, people are scared to go after Quebec. Quebec punches way above its weight. Everybody's scared to mess with them. Nobody wants to get on the bad side. For some reason, they walk on eggshells when it comes to Quebec. So I don't know, are they going to see that level of media pressure? Could we actually see Quebec leaving? And if there is a referendum in either province, obviously that would be precedent setting and make the pathway easier for either one that didn't get it passed in the first place. It's just crazy that once again, Canada is getting torn apart from the inside, but it is due to the federal government destroying Canada as a nation, making it seem as if it never existed. The question is, which one of those two provinces is going to become the 51st state? Speaking of 51st states and Americans and Canadians joining each other, you have this article here from the Calgary Herald, which Calgary is in Alberta, which is funny that the Americans trying to move there, where it might be leaving and joining the U.S. Not an easy thing. U.S. family rejecting Trump's America, spurned by Canadian immigration. A prominent social media influencer who moved to Calgary to escape U.S. President Donald Trump's America has been rejected by Canadian immigration officials 6 months after arriving in Calgary seeking a more tolerant home. Pamela Smith said she and her husband and 3 children are considering leaving Canada for Portugal. Citizenship Canada deemed them ineligible for permanent residency. So a few funny things from this story. The idea is she's fleeing Trump and going to Canada. So she went to Alberta, and if Alberta separates and gets the relationship with the US, that would be funny. But also, it's hilarious that she is a working professional. She tries to come to Canada legally. Canada's immigration department rejects the Americans trying to come legally, but we have hundreds of thousands to millions of Indians coming here through Operation Caribbean, who are coming here basically illegally with fraudulent documents, fake asylum claims, all of that stuff, who continue to sneak their way through the border. So sorry, Pamela, or whatever your name is, I guess you should have been born Indian and then signed up with all of the fraudulent documents, and Canada would have expedited you through, no problem. More info on Canada and the U.S. being connected. The U.S. approves $3.8 billion sale of airstrike weaponry to Canada. Canada is buying close to $4 billion in airstrike munitions from the United States government in a sale disclosed on Thursday, the day before Prime Minister Mark Carney's next meeting with President Donald Trump. So I wanted to cover this before, I just never got the chance. The munitions are a type that can be carried by fighter jets, such as Canada's aging CF-18s or US-made F-35s to carry out strikes. So something tells me if Canada's buying $4 billion in munitions that go for the F-35s, we're probably going to buy the F-35s that we have already agreed to in that contract, and it only makes sense. So shout out to all of the elbows up liberal boomers who have not been going to Florida, boycotting America, not wanting to go down and not support it, because the Canadian government is now buying billions of dollars in military equipment from the US, which of course I have no problem with, but I'm also not boycotting the US. We love America on the channel. Speaking of loving America and shared problems that need to be dealt with on both sides of the border, we have this trending story that's coming out of the US. I think Canada should learn from it, but also I think America needs to take this more seriously when it comes to your own Operation Caribbean, because seeing how fast America reacted, awesome. Now, should it go further? Let's get into it.
The Transportation Department cracking down on illegal providers of commercial driver's licenses. Max Gordon joining us now. All right, Max, what exactly is the administration doing about this?
Hey there, Stu. Well, about 3,000 U.S. trucking schools are about to lose their accreditation if they don't make major changes within the next 30 days. And then another 4,000 U.S. truck schools are being put on notice. Now, according to the DOT, this accounts for around 44% of the total federally registered U.S. truck schools. Now, some of the reasons why these schools are about to be shut down are falsifying or manipulating.
This has been a problem in Canada for decades, and we are still ignoring it. Now, less than 1 year into Trump's second term, the Americans are already cracking down on this. But again, this is also why I think India should be added to the list of the banned countries. But let's get into what they're being shut down for.
Manipulating training data, not meeting required curriculum standards, facility conditions or instructor qualifications, and failing to maintain accurate, complete documentation or failing to provide records. This after a high-profile semi-truck crash in Florida killed 3 people. Transportation Secretary...
Where was he from? Where was that driver from?
Sean Duffy says the crash was caused by a truck-driving immigrant in the country illegally.
Where was he from?
That crash and others following it sparked a debate over issuing commercial driver's licenses to non-citizens. A federal judge temporarily blocked a move by the DOT to limit CDLs for immigrants. Meanwhile, California revoked 17,000 so-called non-domiciled CDLs, and Minnesota and Pennsylvania have been instructed to take similar action after an audit from the DOT.
Great to see the DOT take this so seriously so quickly, because these are dangerous vehicles. These are things that could lead to major issues. We had this clip, which is obviously related to the video now. Obviously, yesterday's video, we saw the foreign entrepreneur, the one who is actually Superman, who could lift the telephone pole off his truck, try and do that. And we see these are the risks on the road. This is what's happening in Canada as the fraud, the scamming, all of this continues to get worse. And that's why I'm saying it's a shared problem between the US and Canada, but the country who is the number one culprit is not being called out enough. Look at this clip here. You can see the footage is a little blurry, but this truck is cutting over, trying to cut from 3 lanes across because they were going to miss their exit. So they tried to cut through 3 lanes of traffic because they were going to miss the exit. That is an absolutely massive liability. This is what happens when these people have no experience, they get fraudulent training, and they come from a country with essentially no rules. And guess what? House arrest for men who ran fraudulent Ontario truck driving schools that targeted Indian immigrants. I'm gonna read it again. House arrest for men who ran fraudulent Ontario truck driving schools that targeted Indian immigrants. For decades, this has been going on. If you called it out, you got called names as if you were the problem, even though after a 5-week trial, Gurvinder Singh and Gurpreet Singh, which is hilarious, that's the most stereotypical names ever, of the brothers Singh, were caught doing this. When are we allowed to call a spade a spade? When are we allowed to say there are certain people who continue to do this over and over? Especially since we just have 2 arrests made from a Brampton man wanted in a $4 million fraud scheme. Well, let's check in on the Brampton man, shall we? Oh, there that kindly young gentleman is, Muhammad Akram. There we go. Muhammad Akram, alias is Chowdhury Akram, and he is here as a foreign entrepreneur making $4 million in unlimited profit, baby. And why worry about following the rules when there's no consequences? They get away with it, and then even if they get in trouble, it's a slap on the wrist, and they just go back to India with all of the money they've made. It's basically constant get out of jail free cards, and that's why when Kirk put out this tweet here are the most common last names of, he says this word, I'm going to say foreign entrepreneurs. In regards to extortions here in Canada, he likes to use that word. I like to use creative sales strategies, creative customer acquisition. And what do you notice? Canada has never had a problem with creative customer acquisition before, and there's a simple way to stop them, but he brought up the names, the most common names involved with the extortion cases. And of course, the brothers Singh is the number one name. Dhaliwal, Boparai, Chopra, and Sharma. Those are good old boys, Canadian names. Names you'd expect to see on gravestones from all of the world wars. They are integral to the fabric of Canada. Speaking of the fabric of Canada, maybe that's why the referendums for provinces wanting to leave continues to heat up, because we have changed what it means to be Canadian. We have changed the rule of laws, and now we may as well be a bunch of fiefdoms competing with each other. I don't think it's too late for us to rebuild the Canadian identity. Part of that Canadian identity is having a strong, healthy relationship with our our best friend, and I do mean the best friend of the United States, who we should treat better and recognize. We keep Canada warm by huddling up to the United States border, so let's start to acknowledge we need those guys and we like them. But if you made it this far in the video, you absolutely rock. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We're trying to get these videos out in front of more people. We are trying to grow the channel. If you want to support the channel, you can do it through the link down below. You can also do it directly through YouTube. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.